So this will overlap some other talks, but I've like been trying to think about how to make this, and really it's about interacting and permanent identifiers when people come to you. You know what? Let's take that person. Let's just take it out, man. An interaction and permanent identifiers when people come to you, right? And so the question is, when the same person comes to us or different people come to us, how do I identify that? And what's the risk involved in assuming two people are the same or two people are different, right? Like if I'm looking for bad actor information, well, then assuming two people are different is wrong, right? Because it's actually the same bad actor. If I'm looking to try and bind something together to give somebody legal protection or for some other reason, then or a discount or something else, then actually the risk of getting that wrong could be bad. Did I just say that right? I think so. Yeah. So this is about interaction and permanent identifiers when people, what is that? When people come to you. Yeah, that's better. Wow. Okay, right? And so one of the things we got to talk about when given identifiers is, are we given the data that they submitted an identifier for every person that they talk about? So, hey, I'm thinking of buying a house and I'm going to put two people on it and we're going to qualify, but I really just want a teaser rate, or I'm thinking of getting a car loan, right? There's actually a million of these. Do I care about who we're talking to, or do I care about who we're talking about, right? In social media, I just care about who I'm talking to. And like from an identity point of view, right? And in like insurance or a loan or healthcare, you care about who you're talking about. And sometimes you care about both, right? Because one's a proxy for the other. And so there are cases, though, where a person will be anonymous and they will deliberately trash their data. Not even talking about fraudsters at this point. They'll deliberately change their data. And so I'm not really talking about the data we capture at this point. I'm talking about the interactions we capture. So there are also two scopes for this kind of, one's in the digital world and one's in the real world. You could argue that most social media doesn't care who somebody is in the real world. They only care who it is in the digital world. And we're willing to take payment from somebody for like services. Like even if I was a Netflix, I care, but we can get by without it, right? Like if I'm a streaming service, I want to make sure the payments work and there's no fraud with the money. But really, do I care who they are in the real world? They could have multiple digital personas with multiple credit cards, and that's no skin off my back. Whereas if I'm a bank and I have to report fraud and people doing things with alternate names, that's bad, right? And so in that case, I care who the person is in the real world. But in the case of a bank, we might do teaser quotes for car loans. And so in that case, I don't care who they are in the real world yet. I only care who they are in the digital world. And when they come back, I may try and rendezvous that digital persona with the real world persona. So I have two personas surf into a website. This originally was like two internet dog. Nobody knows you're a dog on the internet. Two people on the internet walk into a bar. What does it mean? Well, in this case, I'm just gonna like set this up. I've got person EFG and person ABC, and ABC, like let's say we're doing social media, and the other site is a photo capture site, right? Like some company. And in that case, and let's say it's anonymous though, and we could do it with authentication, but actually we can even make this with authentication, right? So I've got two personas. They both got different accounts. Those probably haven't been PII validated against something that nobody should know, or fingerprints or biometric or anything else. And so in this case, I end up with two identifiers, ABC and EFG, that represent two people. And one of those identifiers actually goes into two applications, right? And if we think about it, though, if we didn't do authentication, and even if we do, really, our tracking is really at the device level, right? So I don't really know whether ABC is one person or two persons. Like we can assume, well, no, if they got kids, man, kids use their parents' phone all the time. I use my... You know what? Never mind. And laptops are the same way, right? Maybe everybody, the whole world isn't rich, man. They all don't have their own laptop or their own tablet. So in this case, we think we have ABC being the same person in both apps and EFG being separate, but we're not really sure. And so you have to do a risk assessment and decide, are you really doing like device level tracking, or are you doing person tracking? And so if we think about it that way, we might decide instead to do interaction identifiers, right? So we're going to give every person that comes to the site a different person identifier so that we can protect ourselves from misidentifying two interactions as the same person, right? What's your tolerance for risk? Do you care if you merge two people together by accident, or do you care if the same person gets two split experiences, right? Totally depends on the risk. Marketing risk might be very different from a banking risk, right? So we'll have some decision to make here. Should we do it with an interaction identifiers? And then remember, they come to this site, they don't tell us a bunch right away, they clean their cookies. We might figure out later they're the same. But do we protect ourselves up front and do interaction identifiers? And so just ignoring that tracking again, why is this a big deal? And the reason it's a big deal is our data goes places and then we try and make decisions based on it. We do audit based on it. We may have to do litigation support, or we may have to provide data to a government or like a law, well, that would be litigation or government, right? So person A, B, C comes into the system. Let's say it's an interaction at this time. Oh man, that's bad. You know what? This should have said entity here. They might be a person. I don't know. They could be a bot. It could be a program that represents them in some other system. I mean, I'm not really sure. Man, that is a real bunch of typos there. Okay, anyway. So A comes in, they do an interaction, they come back and they do another action. What happens is our data stores fill up with data about that person or that interaction, right? And so we end up with data bound to person ABC. And what we want to be able to, we got to decide how important the data is. Sometimes you just don't care. Other times you do care, because you're going to end up having to explain to somebody why you did something, right? Why did you tell my ex that I'm pregnant with this other person? Why did you tell this person that I'm trying to not, that I have a restraining, anyway, you know what, let's be much more positive. Why did you tell somebody that I was buying them a present? Whatever it is, right? And so in that case, so down here, we might have another person, EFG. In this situation, we could easily figure out later that those two are the same person, right? In the real world, they were the same blue person, but in our digital world, they were two different people. So what if they are the same person? What are we going to do about it, right? One of the things we got to think about is how far did those identifiers travel, right? And this is actually an argument for giving different identifiers like interaction identifiers and remote identifiers. And this lets you patch this whole thing back together if it turns out to be wrong. But let's talk it through, right? So I have app, man, that's wrong too. If I have app 1, 2, and 3, that's like copy paste in the big way, right? So if I have app 1, 2, and 3, that data went into the analytical store bound to those people. I could also have interactions with third-party partners, where we did a handoff to something like Amazon or, like whatever it is, right? And so am I going to give them the same identifiers? And if I did mismatch that person and wasn't using them as interaction identifiers, then I'm actually might mess up my partner data. Hey, I'm going to give you some linkages, but you know what? I got it wrong. I didn't know who that person was. The other place you could end up running this is a regulator, right? They're going to ask, hey, who did you interact with? What did you know about them? And you'll be like, I had no idea. But really inside you might have, and you might have learned later, and then how are you going to account for that, right? So how far do your identifiers travel? In my mind, this is actually an argument for creating partner and interaction identifiers, especially for external partners, kind of like companies that give a different SKU for each website they're on so that people can't compare them, or so that they can track sales by SKU, right? And so you can kind of think of these identifiers as SKUs. So now we have more than one identifier for the same person. And the question is, what do we want to do about that? How do we want to handle it? One thing we could do is we could do absolutely nothing. Don't care. We'll come back and we'll do it in the back end somewhere. We don't care in operation, or maybe we'll never do it, right? But if we're really, really confident that they're the same person, there's really two paths for this. And I'll probably go into both of these paths because I'm going to run up against my 10-minute mark here. One is you can merge the identifiers. We could take X, Y, Z, and ABC, and we could merge them, and we could tell all our data and all our partners that we really meant this is ABC and X, Y, Z went away. And then you got to hope that everybody gets on board, right? And then you got to figure out what that is going to happen. If your data lake, your other places, you're going to have to update all those identifiers or create remap tables, right? And then you got to eliminate oh man. And then you got to decide what you're going to do about history, right? Are you going to merge the history? Are you going to commingle it? Because that's not right. I had ABC and XYZ, and I have session history for them. and or I have other kinds of history of interactions, and those interactions might have had different preferences, different other things that happened and commingled with each other. What are you going to do? Are you going to merge the history? Are you going to eliminate one of the history? Is the history important? Are you going to, if you're in a lawsuit, does it matter? Another way to do this is identifiers as aliases, and what you do is you bind A, B, C, and X, Y, to Z together in some fashion, and when anybody makes a request for either of those, they get the same person's data back, and then what you do is you have the different histories for those, and somebody could either navigate across the histories, or you could make one of those the primary, like ABC, and that's the history they get. But they could look at the aliases and go, oh man, there's XYZ, let's see what they did, right, for litigation support. So in my mind, you can either link identifiers together in your back somewhere where you need that and it makes sense and you want to know everything that you've done with the person, the conversation history with that person. And the other one is you can merge identifiers. And I'm over, and that's it. I'll do another talk. So that's where we're at. What are the different, this is a lot more complicated than you think when you get into it, if you care.